here are three price scenarios that I'm still looking at when it comes to quant if we ever do see a fully fledged type of altcoin season, even though nothing I say is financial advice. Now, the first one I want to talk about is quant may be at the price of $1,000. Now, at that point, that's around a 9.6x from here, so give or take around a 9.5x to make it more simple. However, market cap considering current circulating supply at that point would be around $12 billion. Now, why don't I find this something that I think is too ridiculous? It's because I am a big fan of Quant's fundamentals, and let me explain why. When it comes to the Quant network, it's made up of the Overledger OS and the Overledger network. Let me start off by explaining the Overledger OS because I think it's going to make it easier to understand the Overledger network later. And when it comes to the Overledger OS, what it does is that it allows something called a multi-chain application to be built. Now, what is that? A multi-chain application, as the name goes, is an application that is built on top of multiple blockchains instead of just one. So for instance, let's say I want to make an application that takes advantage of the strength of the Bitcoin blockchain, but then at the same time, I may not really like its speed. I can kind of supplement that through the Stellar blockchain, which is not only very famous. I mean, when I think about Stellar, I think about XLM, but even besides that, we also take a look at, again, Stellar blockchain known for its lightning fast speed. So then imagine if I can have an application that is not only just stuck on one blockchain, again, being able to take advantage of Bitcoin's alleged rock-solid security, which has kind of been proven historically speaking time and time again, and then at the same time, leveraging the speed of the Stellar blockchain. That's kind of a game changer in my opinion. And again, some people like to say, well, if it's so game-changing, why isn't the adoption the best? Well, again, I think stuff like this takes quite a while, but in the grand scheme of things, I still like the concept, and I find the Overledger OS very interesting for me. Now that I've explained that, let's take a look at the Overledger network. Now, the Overledger network is made up of the Overledger OS users, and on the Overledger network, these Overledger OS users, they can share their data, their apps, their resources, and monetize them. So I think, the Quant network, I don't think it's such a bad thing. Now, even besides all that, some people also like to say, well, no one really cares about Quant. Well, I do, because even though this is kind of an apples to oranges comparison, let me just explain this real quick. If we take a look at the maximum supply of Quant, now this is going to kind of vary depending on where I take a look at it, because sometimes it's different for whatever reason, but let's just say we take a look at a specific range. I see it usually anywhere between 14.5 million to around 14.8 million, give or take. And if we take a look at that range right there, we compare that to Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin's maximum supply? 21 million. Now, if we take a look at that supply again, I get it, that's relatively scarce in the grand scheme of things, but let's say we minus 5 million, right? So let's say we remove that for whatever reason in, let's say, a make-believe scenario. That would be 16 million. That right there would still be over 1 million more than Quant's maximum supply. So, again, I'm not saying that Quant is better, because when it comes to Quant, of course, the perceived fundamentals is not as much as Bitcoin, arguably. But then when it comes to just the rarity, and I would arguably say the use case, what seems more dynamic, I would have to maybe say in that case Quant, because I like the use case when it comes to Quant, and I get it, rarity is not the end-all be-all, because if that was the case, that means the project with the lowest supply would be the best, but then that doesn't seem to be like, the main criteria, you know what I mean? So then when I take a look at something like Quant, I get it. It's more of an apples to oranges comparison when it comes to the supply, but I think that just kind of puts into the grand scheme of things kind of the use case of Quant, and then also, relatively speaking, how kind of rare it is. So this is why I'm very excited. Now, I'm not telling anyone to do anything when it comes to Quant, but I think in terms of its fundamentals, I am a big fan. Now, I want to talk about the second scenario, and that is the idea of maybe $1,500. Now, some people may be thinking, well, okay, the market cap at that point is around 18 billion. Well, when someone says maybe like, oh, that kind of sounds like a ridiculous market cap, my response is that take a look at, for instance, something like Dogecoin, which reached over $80 billion in market cap back in 2021. And look, I get it, Quant probably isn't going to have more hype than Dogecoin, maybe if ever, and especially during this cycle's altcoin season, if we do ever see a fully fledged one. However, this just seems like such a minuscule kind of figure compared to what Dogecoin reached in 2021, right? That was years ago. I'm not saying what could maybe Dogecoin do during this fully fledged type of altcoin season and comparing it to this. No, again, I'm comparing it to Dogecoin's market cap back in 2021, right? Which was over 80 billion. And this, again, Quant at the price of $1,500, considering current circulating supply market cap around 18 billion. It doesn't seem like something too ridiculous, but only time will tell. However, some people like to say, okay, $1,500, it's around a 14.4x from here. So let's say for simplicity's sake, around a 14.5x, right? Some people may be thinking, okay, who cares about that? Well, let's take a look at Dogecoin. Is that going to do around a, 14.5x from here in the next 6 months? I mean, who knows, but the market cap's already pretty massive. You know what I mean? Take a look at also even something like Ethereum. What is that going to do if it reaches 10 grand? Less than a 3x from here. If I take a look at Dogecoin, going to 300 grand. Less than a 3x from here as well. So for me, I get it when it comes to around a 14.5x, give or take. It's nothing that is necessarily going to kind of, not hypothetically going to be the best thing that's going to happen during this cycle, arguably, in my opinion. I mean, there's going to be a lot of microcaps out there that might do this or do that. Who knows? But I'm totally aware of that. But I'm not looking for a microcap either. So for me, Quant kind of fits what I'm looking for. It fits my criteria specifically, where it's kind of a project that is kind of, pretty okay market cap, but not too very massive, right? So I do like its positioning. But this is just my perspective. And again, $1,500, it wouldn't surprise me if it were to ever even happen, arguably. Now, let's say we take a look at the third price scenario, which is maybe the idea of $2,000. Now, this right here is around 19x from here, and market cap, considering current circulating supply at that point, around 24 billion. And again, we've seen something like, XRP not too long ago reach a market cap of around 200 billion, right? And it's not that I'm saying that this is more popular than that, but keep in mind, XRP was around that market cap, and arguably, we're not even in a fully fledged type of altcoin season, maybe yet. And then also, on top of that, this is not something too ridiculous. Again, like I mentioned before, this is also even still over $60 billion, give or take, less than Dogecoin's all-time high market cap. I don't find this something too outlandish. Now, some people may be thinking, okay, how soon? Now, usually altcoins, as kind of a worst-case scenario, they typically peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event. Now, some people may be thinking, okay, when was the last Bitcoin halving event? That was April of 2024. So if we do some basic math, right, we add 18 months on top of that, it's around October this year. Is that a guaranteed date? I don't think so, arguably, because how can that be, 100% guaranteed if it's based on history, right? Like, who knows if it's ever even going to happen at that exact timeline during this, cycle, maybe. However, whenever it maybe does decide to happen, be it November, December, or Q1 of next year, totally fine. I mean, I've been holding Quant, keep in mind, ever since 2022. So it's quite a while at this point. But then, you know what? I'm not just going to leave like that. That's just my perspective. I'm still going to stay patient. And I get it. Quant, ever since then, it hasn't performed the best, right? Ever since 2022. And some people may be thinking, oh, it's not really doing this and doing that. But you know what? I made it kind of too long to just kind of quit like that. So I'm just going to stay patient. I'm not telling anyone to do anything, but this is just what I'm doing. And my strategy is just dollar cost averaging, holding, and just waiting. That's it. I'm just staying patient. And beyond that, again, I'm just waiting. It's a waiting game for me. However, I do like the fundamentals when it comes to Quant. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I greatly appreciate it. It's Willie the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.